And if you've got guys who have really gone about trying to really learn about what feelings are, why we feel like we do, what can we do about it, that's part of the conversation too. We need more male role models out there kind of talking about it and normalizing it so that it becomes something that is second nature to all of us. And
whatever you are doing right now, stop. Because what I am about to walk you through is not a royal soap opera. It is not tabloid noise dressed up in palace language. What happened inside the British monarchy on the morning of March 12th, 2026, is a story about public money, your money, and what occurs when someone finally decides that 30 years of financial entitlement is 30 years too long. By 10:14 that morning, 12 people connected to Queen Camilla's inner circle watched their credit cards stop working. Not freeze, not flag for review. Stop. Completely, permanently. And the man who made that happen did not hold a press conference. He did not leak a single word to the tabloids. He sent one encrypted mandate to the royal family's private bankers at Coutts and Company and walked away. But before I tell you exactly how William pulled off the most surgical financial strike in modern royal history, you need to understand who handed him the weapon, and why that person had every reason to stay silent for the rest of his life. But didn't. If this is already hitting different, do not go anywhere. It gets heavier before it gets beautiful. This is exactly what we do on this channel. We do not let the stories that matter disappear quietly behind palace walls. Subscribe right now, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment telling me what you already think about this. I read every single one, and if you want to make sure you never miss content like this, share this video before you leave. Because this story is only just beginning. Now, to understand the full weight of what William did, you first have to understand what was being protected. For 3 decades, not 3 years, 3 decades, a network of quiet financial arrangements had been operating inside the British monarchy in the service of people who held no constitutional position, no official royal role, and no legitimate claim to a single pound of public money. We are talking about individuals who existed in what I can only describe as the most comfortable gray zone on earth. Not officially royal, not ordinary civilians. Close enough to the crown to benefit from its financial protection, far enough from formal scrutiny to never be examined. Cookbook deals signed with quiet royal adjacency, coronation appearances, private security funded by the sovereign grant, estate expenses absorbed into the duchy's accounts without a single line of public disclosure. And the arrangement worked perfectly for the people it was designed to benefit. It worked so well that no one ever stopped to ask who was actually paying for it. But William was about to ask, and the answer was going to cost someone everything. The answer arrived on March 9th, 2026, at precisely 2:15 in the afternoon. A courier delivered a small package to Adelaide Cottage. Inside was a digital audio file. Duration, 6 minutes and 42 seconds. The voice on the recording belonged to Andrew Parker Bowles, the former husband of Queen Camilla, the father of her 2 children, a man who had maintained a silence so complete and so sustained that palace insiders had long considered it one of the most valuable assets in Camilla's entire arsenal. And he had watched his ex-wife ascend from privately vilified mistress to Queen Consort of England. He had said nothing. Not to biographers, not to journalists, not in the memoirs he was repeatedly approached to write. His silence had been for Camilla institutional armor. Until the morning of April 15th, 2025, when Andrew sat down alone in a private villa in the rolling hills of Wiltshire, placed a recording device on the table in front of him, and pressed record. The recording sat encrypted in a sealed digital vault for nearly 11 months. And when it finally reached William's desk, it did not arrive alone. What Andrew described in those 6 minutes was not a mistake or an oversight. It was a system, a deliberate, decades-long, carefully maintained system. 8 shell companies registered across 3 jurisdictions chosen specifically for their financial opacity. Ghost stipends flowing to individuals who appeared on no official royal roster. Image consultancy firms that existed entirely on paper. No clients, no employees, no operational activity beyond moving money from one account to another. Private debts cleared, first-class international travel funded, high-interest loans serviced. All of it drawing quietly, consistently, invisibly from the sovereign grant and the reserves of the Duchy of Cornwall. The forensic audit. 11 months, 5 investigators from the National Audit Office, working in the dead of night in the high-security archives of Sandringham, confirmed every detail. The final figure, £14,850,000. Diverted. Gone. Funneled across 30 years through a financial architecture sophisticated enough to avoid casual detection and brazen enough to operate at the very heart of the monarchy. But here is the detail that did not just fuel William's resolve. It broke something open in him that could not be closed again. Of that 14 million, over £4 million had flowed into image consultancy companies owned by members of Camilla's family in the last 36 months alone. Companies that, upon investigation, had never produced a single deliverable. They existed for one purpose: to move the Crown's money into private hands. And they had been doing it while the public paid. Here is what I want you to sit with for a moment, because this is where the story stops being about palace politics and starts being about something that should make all of us ask harder questions. If a hospital trust, a government department, or a registered charity had been running 8 shell companies to funnel public money into the private accounts of family members for 30 years, what would we call that? What would the investigation look like? What would the headlines demand? We all know the answer. So why should the institution funded by the British taxpayer be any different? Prince William clearly decided it should not be. And the part of this story that I do not think has been given nearly enough attention is this: he did not act in anger. He did not act on impulse. After finishing his final review of the audit documents at 3 o'clock in the morning, William did not reach for his phone. He did not call his legal team. According to multiple sources close to the household, he walked to the long gallery at Sandringham and sat alone beneath the portrait of his mother, Princess Diana, for 4 full hours. 4 hours of silence before a single order was given. That is not revenge. That is a man carrying the full weight of what he is about to do, and choosing to carry it anyway because the alternative is continuing to look away. When William finally moved, he moved like a scalpel. The Sovereign Grant Act contains a clause so rarely invoked that most palace legal teams have never had cause to study it. A provision allowing the heir to the throne to unilaterally suspend financial arrangements if they can be formally classified as a direct threat to royal security or institutional integrity. By defining the decades-long misappropriation as a security threat to his children's inheritance, William bypassed Parliament entirely. No vote, no committee, no slow grind of public scandal that Camilla's legal team could have used to buy time and build a counter-narrative. He sent a single encrypted directive to the senior management of Coutts and Company at 8:18 in the morning on March 12th. The mandate was absolute: immediate cessation of all secondary account activity, total revocation of corporate credit access for 12 named individuals. By 10:14, the platinum cards were declining across the English countryside, in private clubs, in luxury boutiques, in estate management offices. The financial infrastructure of a shadow court that had operated inside the palace for 30 years collapsed in the time it takes to process a single transaction. At 10:15, William walked into the West Wing corridor where Camilla stood waiting. He looked at her directly. He did not raise his voice. He delivered 7 words: calm, cold, and absolute. The treasury is not your private dowry. Then he turned his back and walked away. Witnesses described the corridor falling completely silent. The only sound that followed, minutes later from somewhere behind a closed door, was the sharp crack of a George IV porcelain cup against a parquet floor. And before the day was out, a high-profile attorney had been summoned. Eviction notices had been served on 3 luxury estates. And the institutional paralysis of a king caught between his wife and his heir had become visible to every senior member of the royal household. But here is what nobody in Camilla's camp had fully accounted for. The public had already chosen. And their verdict was not close. Now, I want to pause here, because I know some of you watching this are going to say, "Hold on, William is not a neutral actor in this story. He holds enormous power himself. This is still a wealthy institution policing its own internal arrangements, and we should be careful about cheering for princes like they are champions of the people." And you know what? That is a legitimate point. That is a genuinely fair challenge to sit with. But here is the deeper question that I think this moment is actually forcing onto the table. A question that goes far beyond one family, one audit, one frozen credit line. What kind of arrangement between powerful institutions and public funding is acceptable in a modern democracy? Because 30 years of unexamined financial access hidden behind layers of shell companies and offshore accounts is not a personal failing. It is a systemic failure, a failure of oversight, a failure of accountability, a failure of the very mechanisms that exist to prevent exactly this kind of quiet, sustained extraction of public wealth into private hands. William did not fix that systemic failure on March 12th. What he did, and what I think history will recognize as the more significant act, is expose it. But he forced a question into the open that this institution has been carefully avoiding for generations. Who does the royal treasury actually belong to? The family that occupies the palaces? Or the country that funds them? The monarchy that William is now constructing, deliberately, methodically, one structural decision at a time, is a smaller institution, a more accountable one. In the spring of 2026, William and Catherine formally took on their role as grantors of royal warrants, the institutional endorsements that define which organizations carry the monarchy's seal of approval. Every brand, every supplier, every partner organization will now pass through the hands of a man who just demonstrated in the most unambiguous terms possible that proximity to the crown is not the same as deserving its protection. On the comfortable gray zone, that profitable in-between space where you benefit from the crown's warmth without being subject to its accountability, is being dismantled, quietly, permanently, one structural decision at a time. And the people who assumed that arrangement was permanent are only now beginning to understand how wrong they were. So here is what I want to leave you with. This is not simply a story about a prince cutting off his stepmother's family. This is a story about what happens when the silence that protects entitlement finally breaks, when the man who was supposed to inherit a system decides instead to correct it. William watched his mother be destroyed, in part, by the weight of things that could not be said. He sat under her portrait for 4 hours before he acted, and when he finally moved, so he did not do it for the cameras, he did not do it for the headlines, he did it because some things are more important than the comfort of looking away. The British monarchy is being restructured in real time. The era of assuming that closeness to power is the same as deserving it is ending. And the question I want to leave with you is this. Do you think this moment will actually change the institution long term? Or is this a personal victory that leaves the deeper structural failures completely intact? Drop your answer below, and if you believe genuine reform of royal finances is long overdue, type reform in the comments right now. This is where we ask the questions that actually matter. Subscribe, share this video, and stay close, because this story is far from over.